It's gonna be a good day today. We're all very hyped.
I joined the mug club today too.
Yes.
See, and today I
Oh,
went,
mug.
I don't have a mug today.
I drink out of this big cup for water. Yeah. Hydrate.
I also have a big cup.
Hydrate, hydro homies.
Hydro flask. Let's go. That's how I know you're from California.
Oh, for real.
What is it, a Visco girl?
Yeah. Hold on, let
You
me
got
get my
your scrunchie?
scrunchie.
Yeah!
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to News from the Real.
Oh, hold yourself.
There's the cold open.
Then give your sound bit for the next intro.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to News from the Real World, where we talk about the top 10 comment-generating posts on the blog this week. My name is Parker. I'm a second-year stage and production management grad student.
I'm Hannah. I'm a third-year sound grad student.
I'm Grace. I'm a first-year costume design grad student.
I'm Evan. I'm a first-year scenic design grad.
And I'm Izzy, and I'm a second-year scenic design grad student. And our first article for today is called Actors' Equity, SAG-AFTRA Settle Dispute Over Filmed Theater. And this was written November 20th by Gerald Raymond Pierce. And the article is talking about the dispute that's been going on for a little bit that people keep talking about between the Actors' Equity Association and the Screen Actors Guild. They finally came to an agreement on coverage of live theater that is recorded or streamed for exhibition for a remote audience. People were surprised because it actually happened, like they came to a conclusion a lot quicker than anybody anticipated, and it was unanimous. It's a little confusing, but basically like during this specific special period of time that's sort of like uncategorized, Equity will cover work of theaters that is recorded or produced in a digital platform with the caveat that they can only have minimal editing. So anything that has severe editing and starts to be more in the realm of film is going to be covered by SAG. A lot of it was like things being shot out of sequence, visual effects, substantially edited. And it said that the biggest problem is that there's a lot of gray areas and like, how do you define that? So it still seems like almost every production, there's going to have to be this conversation about where it's going to actually fall. And a lot of the student comments were talking about like, why is it such an undefined amount of time? Like, because the pandemic, like just because we have a vaccine, it's not going to be over. So there's all of that. Like, when are we going to actually shift over to how it was before? But also, like this type of theater is going to continue after the pandemic. A lot of people are saying there's like such an interesting way of taking media and using theater and media together and the benefits of a remote audience. So after the pandemic's over, then who's going to cover it? And the last student comment was talking about there's this caveat for audience size. So if it's being covered by either union, they have a specific size for your audience. And it's something like 200% of what your theater house would be. And a lot of people are confused because like they don't see a reason in this time to limit how many people can take in this content.
Yeah, it definitely feels like SAG-AFTRA made a deal where they were like giving something up, but only in a very limited, very time-specific way. They're like, we're giving this up for now, but we want it back later, which is odd because I think a lot of the things that they're talking about in terms of live streamed, live broadcast, non-edited events, I think it'd be hard to call those movies. I think it'd be hard to say that those things are under the jurisdiction of SAG-AFTRA.
SAG-AFTRA, though, it covers like morning news, cable news, and you know, sporting events too.
Yeah.
So it's
well, and I guess I wouldn't
how do you
argue
do
that those things
minimal
are theater,
editing?
but I don't know why.
I think that's been the thing everyone's been trying ever since this type of theater started, is like trying to define theater, which is just, we're never going to really have a definition for theater. So it's such a complicated conversation.
Definitely. And I think the 200% limitation in this time, right, when they allowed Equity to continue to produce limited edited productions. I think, again, putting another limitation of the audience size in this time, in the like allotted year that is okay, is ridiculous. And maybe that 200% can be used in the post-COVID, which is hard to fathom, but like the post-COVID world. In that sense, as these things continue, I don't know if that 200% feels fair right now.
Right. I think, for good or for bad, I don't think that streaming theater is going away. I think that there have been some companies, although not most probably, that will have seen some benefits and will want to have larger access to the shows they produce as part of their regular live season.
Yeah, and and that was another thing, is that the shows that they pick have to be within the realm for the theater that they worked for. So if your theater has only been doing like The Music Man, Grease, Hairspray, you can't all of a sudden go into like a live adaptation of a movie script or like a new work or something. Like, you need to stay with your audience, which is kind of weird. Like, I know they're trying
That's asinine.
What?
Yeah,
How
I don't know how they worded it, but they were like, you can't use this as an excuse to just do whatever you want and edit as much as you want to whatever size audience. They were like trying to find ways to fit it into boxes, which just seems like against the practice of performance art.
I think a lot of people are going to try to spin this as a win that the two people were able to agree on something, but honestly, I think that Actors Equity had a lot more to lose than SAG-AFTRA did, because they obviously aren't making any money in the pandemic without there being live theater, and I think that shows in what the agreement ended up being, that SAG-AFTRA held a lot of the cards.
It's a shame.
Definitely.
Just going to be an ongoing fight, I think, for the foreseeable future.
When I first heard this, I was like, oh, so, it's all over. No, it's going to be another fight. And, that 200% of your house capacity bugs me, because these theater companies, they tread water and don't do it well as is, and limiting that in a point where they can't get the concessions and alcohol sales as part of their revenue source is honestly kind of cruel. It's
directly limiting profit to what gain?
Right. And there was also like a note about you were only considered like covered as a theater if you were selling tickets to your specific show, and that it was like television or like more of like a movie equity thing if you were going to be having it on a streaming service. So if a streaming service wanted to pick up your show, like that wouldn't be okay, because that's not
like
theater.
A Netflix, Hulu,
I suppose that
Prime.
Yeah, it didn't specifically say that; it just said streaming services. So I don't know if it means like any
Does that include StreamYard and Twitch, or does it not include StreamYard?
Right. It can't. I don't think it can include Twitch, because most of the theater I've been seeing is through Twitch. So
it sounds like SAG-AFTRA has like very high expectations of the kind of virtual digital theater that theater companies are trying to do, because it like Izzy was saying, a lot of the streamed theater is over these like, I would consider like smaller platforms that aren't necessarily streaming services, right? Like Zoom or Twitch or stuff. So it's not like your local regional theater is trying to strike a deal with Netflix.
Right.
That'd be awesome.
It's interesting looking at this perspective of the trying to produce virtual theater, but there's a whole nother realm that is also happening at the same time. And in the next article, talks about how Equity handles in-person theater. And this was a very in-depth article with a lot of information, titled "Quarantine, Ventilate, Be Ready to Quit, In-Person Theater in the Time of COVID," written by Rob Weinert Kent on November 18th, 2020. It essentially talks about staging a production through staging an equity production in the time of COVID. The artistic director at Premier Stages at Keene University, John Wooten, typically sends 4 pages to Equity in terms of the agreement for a production. This particular production was a cast of 2. It was a production of Fannie Lou Hammer, which is a production I wasn't familiar with beforehand, but it essentially tells the life story of an activist, and it very fitting for this time. Typically, he sends 4 pages to Equity, and in this particular instance for a cast of 2, only 5 performances. It was an outdoor production.
Can we all go around and guess how many?
Yes,
people?
please. I think this would be great. And I'll even give you a hint. They went back and forth and is quoted 15 times between between Equity and this particular theater. They do give an estimate number of pages that it ended up being. Let's go around. Hannah, what do you think?
Like 26.
Grace?
27.
I was gonna say 40.
Evan?
I think I remember the number from the article, but I laughed, but I can just say it. I think it was 30, right?
It was 30.
Yeah.
You guys are funny. That's wild. He talks about rainbow colors of highlighter being very specifically detailing what needs to happen to keep this a COVID-safe environment and have the union pass off on it. Equity has only passed off on, I believe the number was 12, around 12 performances in this time to happen in a live way and an in-person way. The article does mention non-union theaters who have ignored the guidelines have not fared well, is all that they have stated. But I feel like that goes without saying. So here are the specifics. I think this is the important part, right? This is what this theater had to do to get the show to happen in person. They quarantined the cast in housing provided by the company. This company was in a unique position because they operate at a university, so they had that university housing available, and it was new housing with state-of-the-art ventilation, which the artistic director warns will be a large hiccup if you do not have something like that already available, because Equity sets a very high bar for the ventilation in the spaces that you're to be using. Every 3 to 5 days, the cast had to have not 1, but 2 negative COVID tests. So it was an ongoing cycle of tests provided by the company. Rehearsals started in Zoom while everyone was isolated for the first 2 weeks before they got those negative tests. And then it transitioned to the outdoor space that they'd be performing in. And the press rep became the safety coordinator. And that one individual was in charge of driving the cast around, any wig maintenance, any microphone maintenance. That was the one person that was cleared to be in the actor space and responsible for taking care of the safety of the production, which I thought was a really interesting way to go about things. The quote that ends the article that I think summarizes this the best, it says, "We were prepared at any minute to pull the plug." And that seemed to be the theme of this, right? The cast and the artistic team was told by the director, because they hadn't gotten approval from Equity when they started work on the production, that at any point when they were, if they had been denied approval, they would be paid for the work that they had done, which was awesome. And eventually they were able to get that approval after going back and forth so many times. It just seems like a lot of, no one was certain for a long time if they'd be able to put on the show. And it sounds like he said this couldn't be repeated easily, and it certainly couldn't be repeated now because cases have gone up so high. Keene University is completely remote now. So it seemed like it fit perfectly in the time period, right? It took a moment.
I really love the dedication to being ready to stop, because I think that some of the articles we've read about people doing theater over the past months have been like, theater no matter what has sort of been like an undercurrent, like, we will produce theater, we will not be stopped. And I really like that they approach it being like, we have to be ready to stop if that's the right thing to do. I think that's really smart.
Completely.
I wonder, like, if the people working on it are being paid more or less than they usually would, because I'm thinking of like the sacrifices you would have to make to do that. Like, you'd be away from your family and your apartment, and you're isolated for all of the rehearsal process and then the run of the show. It feels like they're demanding so much more from people.
I had that same thought.
Like
We
it's
think it's
probably
like, oh,
like
it's easy.
incremental, right? Like, because that's what most companies do already, is they house you, and they pay for plane, train tickets. They make it as easy for you, I think, as for like the visiting artists to be in the space. I guess I can only imagine that actors especially are just happy to have the work
Yeah.
and have somewhere to be.
and it's still an equity contract, right? And I think putting that Zoom rehearsal in the period of time while they were quarantined and in their rooms, I think was smart to not have like an overlap in time. It's interesting to see things happening in a live.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious about profitability. I mean, it sounds like both runs were really short, like 2 weeks or something like that, right? Less than a month.
Five performances
shows.
only.
Oh yeah,
That's
yes,
a
it's super
weekend.
short.
Yeah, that's depending how they split it up. I know it was only 5 performances.
Right, a weekend or two. I mean, there's a balance. You know, to do show business, you have to have show and business.
And I didn't even talk about the second production. The Goodman also did the same production and went to 9 different parks in Chicago, which I thought was awesome, with the goal of hitting every neighborhood within Chicago.
Oh yeah, those are free though, I believe.
Which were free, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I keep forgetting that like most of the United States, or a large part of the United States, doesn't have to hunker down because of snow and cold weather. And so we're like talking, it's, you know, December 13th and we're talking outdoor theater, and I'm going, who's going to outdoor theater right now? People in California, that's who. People in Florida. Oh God, I'm next. Speaking of like the nonsense that is happening right now. The largest cluster off campus here at Carnegie Mellon happened to date. It was 18 students who were living in a off-campus cluster. So it was between 2 households where many people lived and the students who interacted with them on a regular basis. Thankfully, only one of the students had any dealings with campus. So CMU didn't have to change too drastically its approach or disrupt too many classes and in its tracing. But it's a little scary to think about how close to home it really is. I know myself personally, I've been a little lax and getting more so as the time goes on, which is not good. The school talked about how social events like Halloween, previously election, and Thanksgiving, and going into the holiday season, it's really hard for them to kind of control the students and halt off-campus transmissions. But they do recommend that if you're going to go somewhere, don't.
I've said it before on the podcast, but I don't know what the secret is at Carnegie Mellon, but it really seems like Carnegie Mellon has done a better job than some other college campuses at curtailing this kind of stuff. I don't know what they're doing. I can't speak to what they're doing differently. But I definitely was worried coming into the semester about, is there a charitable way to say this? Underclassmen freshmen who had been cooped up with their families for 6 months and were suddenly free in a new city. I thought they were going to run crazy. And it seems like if that has happened, they've done it responsibly.
I think CMU just really takes it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like those emails we get, it's like, I don't know if you hear the same voice in your head that I do, but it's like, you must get tested before you travel for Thanksgiving, you know? And it's like, we will provide testing again if you don't, like, if you're traveling for Christmas or something. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm not doing anything. But yeah, I think also I read a statistic that like 60% of students at CMU are international. So I think we just have like numbers on our side. We're just smaller. And I'm going to assume a lot of students aren't in Pittsburgh this year. And I think CMU is doing a great job of testing us and having all of that offered to us. And because I, talked to some other people who go to other schools, and I was talking to someone, and she was like, "Oh yeah, like my school is doing it, but like I don't know, like I was gonna like leave before they started the testing, so like I didn't get tested." And I'm like, "Why do you feel so calm about this?" Because I definitely am like I would have found a way to get tested, regardless if like whether it's through a doctor's office or like CVS or something. So I don't know. I think CMU is just really like iron fist. Like, let's not screw this up.
I think the hybrid model, and as hard as working through productions right now is proving, I think that is also a big reason why we've been so successful with COVID cases. I know of a campus where in-person productions happened with masks and distance, and a large percentage of that cast had COVID by closing night. So it's really important, and I'm proud to go to the school, and see that. Even though we had, like, there's an article about 18 cases. For a lot of schools, that's not a lot of cases.
Yeah.
What was the article about Pitt a couple weeks ago that had?
It was like over 400 students that tested positive over a
Right.
weekend.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like at CMU, the information's so public, whereas like that's not news anywhere else. They just be like, oh yeah, well it happens. Like we have a college campus, so of course a couple hundred students are gonna get COVID.
Which
But
is
at CMU, they're like, just so you know, this happened and it's public information, and you need to take care of yourself and not leave your house.
Yeah, and the last cluster email we got was like 5 people, right? Or something like that. And that was in September or something. And it was like a house, like a group house. And you're like, oh, okay, 5 people. Good to know.
And there was that one that was like a faculty member, and they sent the email that was like, for shame, we're letting you know what happened and we see the issue and this person is going to go through the consequences. I read that. I was like, wow, people need to take this seriously. It's scary, and they're going to call people out.
Public shaming. Maybe that's the trick.
Instead of stocks with a mask on.
Yeah, there you go.
Campus.
Well, I guess speaking of ways to safely continue doing things as normal, this next article is titled "The Film Crews Being Directed from a Continent Away." And this is on BBC News by Richard Bainbridge. And it basically just kind of explains how it's mostly commercials, how they're being filmed right now during this pandemic. And there has been an advance in technology and creating of different programs that allows directors and other people on production teams of commercials to work on them remotely, but like live. So there's a program called Q-Take, which was created in 2009 by Vlado Struhar, who's a Slovakian film director. So basically, like, you could have your skeleton crew on location wherever they are in the world, and then you can have your director sitting somewhere else, but who can watch everything that's happening in real time in HD through this program. Like, basically, seeing what the camera lens is seeing. So that's given a lot of like freedom, right? Especially for now, like, and it has eliminated a lot of costs in terms of flying people out, housing them, feeding them. Also, like, just they mentioned kind of like the wine and dining aspect of it as well, like when you fly certain people out to these locations. And the article mostly talks about commercials, which makes sense because they're obviously like much shorter production timelines, and they're probably a little less artistically involved than like a movie is. But apparently some major films have been using this technology, like the next Jurassic Park and Batman movies. But there are a lot of like directors who push back, and they're like, that's not a part of my process. Like, I like to be there, and it's about creating relationships, and it's about the intimacy and working with the actors and finding chemistry. So some directors are like, I can't do that, 1,000 miles away on a computer screen, which is understandable. So yeah, and it just talks about more technology. It talks about this like kind of like virtual backdrop green screen type thing, but instead the screen can actually like show what's happening in real time. So it's sort of like literally making the movie in front of our eyes. So and they say it allows the actors to like better connect with their surroundings, so that they like they visually know where they are, and they're not just in front of a green screen. So I think it's really cool to see the technology advancement. Obviously, I had the same thought, but a lot of student comments are saying like, what does this cost? Like, it may be cheaper to not fly a whole team out to a location to film something, but like I don't see this being an option for like smaller theaters, the way it is for film and television.
Well, and even if it became cheap, I don't know many directors in my life who would want to do this, who would want to direct a cast that is live and in a room from Zoom. You know, I think that would feel really frustrating. I also love that the article describes, at the very beginning, describes the director as yelling action, which seems really unnecessary. Like, you could just say it, you know, name it probably.
Yeah, I think I could see this totally being an option for like a lot of those remounts. And there's an article later where I'll talk about the Nutcracker, but like things that are like that, like, you know, the Christmas carols, the thing that, you know, like I don't know, like, yeah, it may be really hard to direct like a very dramatic play via this, but if it's just if it's just like a matter of teaching blocking and choreography and things like that, you know, it would be really cool to see this happen for theater. Because I don't know, it's got to be better than Zoom, is my thought.
Mm-hmm. Probably frustrating for the actor.
Definitely.
Well, our next article is about something that is frustrating for actors. So the article from Lighting and Sound America is titled "Behind the Scenes Mental Health Initiative Launches Tools to Fight Bullying, Harassment, and Intimidation." I'm going to begin with a quote at the top of the article because I think it summarizes it really well. It reads, "Last year, the Behind the Scenes Mental Health Initiative conducted a survey that revealed that bullying, harassment, and intimidation are a common experience in our industry. Respondents told us emotional abuse is part of the culture, and harassment, discrimination, and retaliation are rampant." So to fight against that, they've launched a campaign to help employers and workers recognize and stop bullying. So they have a webpage where they have produced a series of posters to hang in workspaces, as well as a brochure and a sample harassment policy that they made available to people. And they've also partnered with other organizations to compile mental health resources and tools on another webpage. So there aren't a lot of student commenters this semester, but I know that I question the effectiveness of posters as a tool to fight intimidation and bullying. When I think of
just those cat posters, hang in there.
Right, exactly.
The whole article reads like it's a Bowling for Soup song. The high school never ends. Like, we're adults. Why is this happening?
Yeah, I don't know the reference, but when I think of the theaters that I worked at where there were toxic work environments, it was not the case that management saw it as a problem and was thinking, how can we put up posters to solve this?
Right.
Yes. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, it could be beneficial to have posters maybe for like bystander training. Like, if you see somebody else being harassed or harassing, here's a number to call, or like you could scan it and fill in like a blank form or something. Like, I can see that being helpful. But a person who makes a toxic work environment or harasses people they're either aware and they're a bad person, or they are just so out of it that they don't realize the effects that they're having. So them seeing a poster is not going to enact any sort of change at all.
Oh no, I was going to bully this kid, but there's a poster right above him. Now I can't.
Right.
I agree and disagree with that. Just looking at it from like a management perspective and talking to what Evan had just said about management setting the tone, right? And if management doesn't see it as an issue, then it's going to be an environment where that type of behavior is acceptable. And simply putting up the poster and like and enforcing that as an environment that we want to have. And I think about the positive work environments I've been in, and they got posters, you know, like I know it's not.
It's definitely better than nothing. It's better than not saying anything, because at least it's making a stance.
And of course you're right. Like, a poster is not going to single-handedly solve the issue, right? But it certainly helps create an environment where that behavior isn't accepted. And the bystander thing, you're right, totally. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't have my cynical hat on too much. I mean, I also wonder in a theater, especially a smaller theater, where do you put the poster? You're not going to put it in the lobby.
I tend to think the call board, right, and make these links and this information accessible in the welcome packet, like make sure that it's my job as a manager to set the tone, right? So if I can help provide these materials, regardless of if 9 out of 10 people don't look at anything, but that one person looks at the link and it has some sort of a positive impact, like that's worth it, and that's why it should be there.
Well, and that perhaps is the point. Like, I don't think these people wasted their effort by making these posters or the policy guides. I hope that it is the beginning of a larger effort, and I hope that there are companies that take on the materials that they presented.
And I don't mean to say that like literature is going to solve this problem, right? Like I think it's about building that community of people who will speak up.
Yeah, it's like slowly changing the culture. Like you say, the literature is not going to like solve it instantly, but by introducing that, hopefully it teaches other people to know or to acknowledge, their own behavior or call out other behavior, or at least try to hold like management accountable for others for that toxic behavior.
Positive propaganda. We love it.
Yeah, if there's action that follows the poster, then they're doing their job.
Speaking of toxic work environments, our next article is the difficult genius trope was always problematic. Now it's obsolete. This was written by Anne Hornaday for the Washington Post on November 26th. She talks about a new documentary, Zappa, where a young Frank Zappa admits in an interview that he cheats on his wife. This article goes in and explains how this kind of trope of the problematic auteur is overused and to the point of almost being cliche nowadays, where this person who is, a hobbled mess of character defects, sociopathic, egotistical, drinking, all of the above, and they can get away with it because they're incredibly talented in some artistic pursuit, is not something that is acceptable or palatable nowadays, and it should be something that is left alone for the bygone era, not kind of glorified and seen like, oh, these tragic people who, they had harsh lives and they're like this because they're troubled and by their genius or what have you, which is, kind of nice. I think it's stupid that you don't have to be, just because you're good at what you do doesn't mean you can't be a dick.
Well, a lot of people, what they do and are also like kind.
Yeah, and what I think it's interesting that it's always a he in these movies and these
yeah,
it's always a he.
That's what I was going to say, is like you think back to the actual artists that were known for being that way, or like in history books or in art history, you'll learn about these artists and how they cheated on their wives constantly or were like horrible drunks, and they kind of like romanticize it.
Mm-hmm.
And you just now think like how much power and privilege pretty much every single one of these people had, because now it's more of like most people in our industry are very talented, and there's always going to be people who are equally or more talented than you. So now it's more of like, I don't know if it's necessarily cancel culture, but people understand now, like, if you're not living up to your expectations and being a decent human being, then there's plenty of people who are killing for your spot, so it's just
I feel like it creates this feedback. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, you're good.
Sorry. I feel like it creates this feedback loop too, where people say, hey, this is a person who is creative and successful and an asshole. Do I need to be an asshole in order to be successful? Right? Like I feel like I have some version of this conversation all the time. And when I mention, you talk about people in your industry and someone goes, oh, they're terrible, but so successful. And you go, do I have to be terrible? Like, is that what it takes?
There's this, the article brings that up where it's like, if you take away their assholeness, then you take away their artistic abilities. And it's like, no.
Who would want to work with somebody like that? Like, why were people putting up with that?
Because I think it was much more of a person game back then. I mean, it's still like a who you know and how you know them, but I think it was even worse back then because the opportunities were so less.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how many writers and voice actors can get their name out there and show talent just solely because they did a podcast and it gets picked up, or our artists, they can, draw all these comics and the internet can just spread them to huge audiences.
I mean, Gen Z wrote a whole musical on TikTok, so watch out.
Ratatouille, yes.
They'll pull up the receipts. That's the thing. They're really good at researching, so no one's safe.
I do
Everything
think I'm
lasts forever.
looking back at this though. I feel like I've definitely seen a change in the last the humble 4 or 5 years I've worked in theater. Right. I think at the beginning I was told, I was explicitly told several times, watch out for this person. They're an asshole, right? But they have so much talent, that's why they're here. Or this outside director is a pill, but we have to hire them because they're the only person around, or whatever the story is. And then in the past year or two, I've seen actual change happen in companies where, I've seen the change happen of not based on their artistic talent, but based on their other.
Yeah, I even noticed that in undergrad a little bit. Like my teachers try to stress that, people are going to want to work with you if you're fun to work with.
Yep.
And it's kind of nice to see that change now.
Yeah, because they can train you to do pretty much anything. Like so much of it is opportunities. So they're going to give the opportunity to the people that they want to spend time with.
Definitely. This next article, I will be upfront and say that it definitely hit me a little hard. It's a little emotional. And it relates somewhat to this article that we were just discussing in terms of, I suppose, performance. But the next article is titled, "An engineer in the fatal 2012 Radiohead stage collapse in Toronto is found guilty of professional misconduct," written by Liam Casey in the Canadian Press, posted November 24th of this year. For those unfamiliar with what had happened in 2012, the engineer Dominic Cugliari signed off and said that the stage was structurally sound, signed his name, although he hadn't checked out several aspects of the stage. And ultimately that stage collapsed and ended in the death of the drum technician. His name is Scott Johnson. And it was a tragic event in 2012. And this article kind of talks about the course of justice that came to the engineer. In this article is written 8 years later, and the final decision had just been made. The original court case that the parents of the victim started was thrown out because they couldn't get to trial in time, and there were several logistical issues that got the case thrown out, so they weren't able to revisit it until 2019, which is ironically a year after Dominic Cugliari's engineering company went bankrupt. So he had become a retired engineer by 2019. And this final court case ultimately, through the research, deemed that he had made several negligent decisions about the trust and trusting the contractors and not checking out equipment. The truss was put together incorrectly and not rated for the weight of lighting equipment they had. There were several large issues with the setup of the stage. So ultimately in 2019, he was deemed guilty and he issued an apology, and his engineering license was revoked. And that was the extent of the punishment. So the end of this article is the father of the victim talking about how 8 years of not knowing is destroyed him, and that the ultimate, the band, it was at the Radiohead concert, and Radiohead came out and said this apology is 8 years too late, and it means nothing essentially, and yeah, it was just a sad story to think about. Justice wasn't done, is I think the point of the article, right? A retired engineer lost his license for a fatal mistake 8 years ago.
Wait, there wasn't any legal?
Nothing.
anything?
No.
Wow.
Unless I
Not
misread
even, like,
the article.
No manslaughter charge or
Oh,
anything.
geez.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, this sounds like a manslaughter charge.
Yeah,
No.
negligent homicide or something. I mean, what's
Yeah.
crazy about this, and what I didn't know a ton about this story. I had heard of the Radiohead disaster in 2012. I didn't know that he was in charge of an engineering company for the following 7 years.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
insane to me.
Who would so hire this idiot?
Right.
Himself. He owned the company.
No, but people had
Who
to
would go
contract.
with
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But on it kind of, what was he doing that he was so busy that he wasn't, I guess if you do it for long enough, that paranoia of like everything needing to be perfect or something bad could happen goes away. But like, you know, is there no responsibility when you put something up like this
Right.
for the lives of other people?
The thing that really got me is how easily it could have been me or any of the people that I know. How easily any of us could have been under that, you know? That's what
I don't think I've ever walked into a space and thought, oh, I don't trust the security of this building. Like, I just assume that there's so many like steps and inspections and confirmations. Like, I never have had to worry about it. So now it's like, how horrifying is that? And like oftentimes firms like architecture engineers, like they will work with similar companies. So I wonder, like, if he's trying to blame the contractor at the beginning, or saying like he just blindly trusted the contractor, did he work with those same contractors for several other projects? Like, has he never been checking in with other contractors? Has he made a statement explaining in great detail everything that happened? I don't know.
I think it has to be the thing where you go, well, there hasn't been a problem the last 30 times. You know, like, why would there be a problem today? I mean, I think it's, to draw a weird parallel, maybe, I think it's one of the problems we're having with the coronavirus is that people see a friend once and go, well, nothing bad happened. And they see a friend twice and nothing bad happens. And they say, well, if every time I see a friend, I never get coronavirus.
right.
Yeah, I guess it is really similar because I'm just thinking about like if you worked for an engineering company or you were in charge of setting up this stuff. Like, I mean, I don't do any of it, but like it's been drilled in everyone, I feel like, who goes to like theater school as well. Like you have to follow the rules. You have to check things. It is literally life or death. So I guess it's just negligence. It's just someone who doesn't care. Because how would that not weigh on someone's conscience for 7 more years?
Right, how would you not quit the industry?
Right. I think there were so many points of contention with the safety of that stage that it is impossible to argue that it wasn't negligent. I mean, it failed on multiple accounts. And I think maybe it's false optimism, but I like to think that if this were to have happened today, or, you know, maybe there'd be more consequences, or maybe a more in-depth look at things initially instead of waiting 8 years to come to some sort of a verdict.
Sad to say that because it was 8 years ago.
8 years ago. 8 years ago. And the family has waited 8 years. I mean, the end of the article is horrible. The father talks about, you know, everyone's telling me that time heals. For those people who say that, I'd like you to come with me to the cemetery to visit my son, to see that that's not the case. You know, like it was a heavy thing to read. I mean, it really highlights the importance of double checking the safety of your equipment.
We had a saying in the Marines was always inspect what you expect. And if you expect it to be good, you should inspect it that it's good.
Yeah, it really should be that simple. So that's a good way to put it. And that kind of goes into our next article in the way of like having paperwork to look back to and documentation. And it's about why is 3D modeling software important to design, by Emily Engel, wrote about 2 weeks ago. And it's talking about how as technology advances, we're starting to see the benefits from a digital workflow. And it kind of breaks apart the benefits, like cost savings, because you don't have to spend the money on materials to design and build these things. You just have to pay the upfront cost for the software. And a lot of times if you're working with a firm or a studio, that will be covered for you. So it might not come out of the pocket of the designer. Kind of with the past article, easier flaw recognition. You can do a lot of tested simulations and you can see where the flaw happened, who created the flaw, and it's easier to check these things. There's an ease of use and efficiency because people are speaking the same digital language, and you're able to have like unparalleled detail and accuracy when it comes to like very minute specific details. And then it kind of turns into an ad towards the end about like why Fusion 360 is specifically better than other softwares. But I think this is actually really important right now during the pandemic, because it said that it allows the team to communicate from afar, which a lot of these programs, it's like an external thing, and then you have to communicate in another way, but it sounds like it's sort of blending together the communication with the actual document, and you can have real-time collaboration with tools, which is something that I've been having a really hard time with working on projects, is having assistants, and then we have to have like a Zoom screen open, and then we have like our Miro sharing board open, and one person will drag a picture, but another person just click that picture so it glitches out. So I think that would actually be really useful. And the student comments were mostly rejoicing this and how like we can't imagine doing our work right now without our digital workflow, and the value of communication for non-technical people because it's becoming more and more user-friendly. And then Katie brought up a good question that I always think about is 3D modeling worth the time and effort? Because we don't, like for theater, we don't need to be detailed for every project. Like if we were building a building, yes, we would need to have everything so figured out. But for theater, you know, are you starting to waste your time and your resources by making this beautifully rendered model when in actuality, when it's in the space, it's going to be, you know, painted differently, or things are going to be thrown together in a safe yet different way. But yeah, I was just talking about, thank goodness we have this at our disposal right now.
It might be more useful for those who do the technical production side of things, like the actual construction, rather than like the artistic designers. But it's honestly kind of amazing the power that some of these 3D drafting programs have. I think you can do this in Revit and AutoCAD, but like you can actually put in the materials that you will use, and it tests it for like tensile strength and other things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can get incredibly detailed and precise about it.
Yeah, I've always found a value in one of the things I really like about digital model work as a theater designer is that it is a lot easier to work on a digital model during tech than it is to work on a physical model during tech. There's a better ability to be more time efficient that way.
What do you mean? You don't like to make your physical models in the dark with just a tiny lamp?
If I get a table at all, just on my lap.
Right. Yeah.
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry.
Oh, well, I was going to say, kind of echoing Evan, like, you know, and also that comment that Izzy brought up, is it a waste of time? Well, I mean, you just have to kind of like get to know how to use your technology well. And I think in the end, the amount of time and resources you save is going to be huge. And I think in this digital world, especially now, having the consistency is really important. Like you can just send off like files, right? Way easier than like taking crappy pictures on your phone and bad lighting of something and hoping that it translates to the person on the other end.
Yeah, well, and when I mostly use SketchUp. That's what I mostly use for digital modeling. But like the ability to get a director on the other end of a Zoom screen even, and go to the digital warehouse and drag in new things makes it a lot easier to update it in real time, and have the director see changes, which is nice too.
Fast at digital, like drafting digitally, you can easily make 3D models that you can manipulate and light in real time.
What program is that?
A lot of these Vectorworks can do that. I know
V-Ray and SketchUp is really good.
Yeah.
Well, I guess completely unrelated to all of this is the next article from Broadway World. titled Helen Mirren believes that Shakespeare should not be taught in schools. Talk about a clickbait.
Yeah, I
This is
was
a
so
hot-
ready to be like
this is a-
angry at Helen Mirren when I clicked on this, and then
This is a
it's
piping
fine
hot
as it
take.
turns out.
Yeah, so it's basically like they just didn't finish the sentence. So Helen Mirren recently had a conversation over Zoom with the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company's artistic director, Gregory Doran, saying that I don't think Shakespeare should be taught in schools. All young people's experience of Shakespeare should be live theater. And she believes that teaching it in a classroom can make the sometimes archaic language alive, the challenge of teaching it in a classroom versus live theater is that the accessibility of the language, right? And so seeing it live and in a more maybe like conversational way can make it easier to digest for students who have never been exposed to it.
You can get all the dick jokes if you see it live.
Yeah, well, it's probably a lot more comfortable for the teacher to have them watch it versus having them act it out themselves. But I really short and sweet article. It really, and then for the most part, it just kind of like talks about Helen Mirren's credits. I mean, she's done a lot of theater, like all English actors have. They all are like classically trained, have all worked at the RSC, the National. Like, we get it, you're talented. So I guess kind of diving into the student comments, there's sort of this like lukewarm agreement. They're like, yeah, like I kind of agree with what she's saying, but someone brought up a good point that there's some like problematic themes and topics today that wouldn't have a conversation or dialogue around it if students were only watching it being performed. And having it in a classroom setting allows this conversation to happen, whether it's, just talking about like misogyny or, like just any kind of theme, or however a company may decide to implement the story, because we all know people love doing anything they want to do with Shakespeare. So yeah, and I mean, having worked at a Shakespeare company for a while, I definitely, I don't think it's as black and white as Helen Mirren puts it. Sorry, Helen Mirren. In case you're watching this, that
Also,
it's
thank
important.
you for watching this, Helen Mirren. If you're
Right.
watching this, we love you.
Yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to have you on. But I think it is important to like read the text and to also watch it. I mean, I had to like read Shakespeare in high school, and like while I may not have loved it at the time, I definitely have like an appreciation for it now. And it's also just like kind of like cultural currency. Anyone want to know the context of like some of the most common archetypes in media. And
How many stories are Romeo and Juliet? How many stories are Hamlet?
Right. The Lion King. Guess what? Your mind's about to be blown, kids. But the Shakespeare company, and I think a lot of Shakespeare companies do a good job of doing this, especially if they're like nonprofits, is having education programs. So like our company had this community outreach and education program where our education department would go out to the public schools in the city, and they would create kind of like lessons or like informational packets where maybe the students are reading this play in class, and then they come and talk about it and they have a conversation, and then they bus in. We have what we call student matinees, which are at like 10 a.m. on a weekday. So if you're on crew and you've ever been called your theater at like 8 a.m. and you're like, this is awful. But they bus in like 5 or 6 schools, whether they're middle or high school, and they just sit there and they just like react to it. And let me tell you, those kids are so much like, kids are just so much smarter than we believe. And I think giving them that outlet to like be expressive and instantly react to the content is probably some of the most valuable like feedback as whether you're an actor, director, designer, or whatever. It's just like great feedback to have, because you're having people take it at such like face value, like, fresh eyes. And it's going to be the most like honest feedback you get too. Like we did Romeo and Juliet, and when we do those student matinees, we literally get emails from every design departments will get emails from the education director and say, these are the things you need to fix for the student matinees. Like, we did Romeo and Juliet, and they're like, that scene the next morning where we kind of see a little flash of his butt, he can't do that. You need to give him bigger underwear. So it's like, all right, guys, gotta go buy some big underwear. But but how they react to it, I think, is just so like honest, and all of the actors say that those are the best performances they get to do, because how often do you get your normal Shakespeare audience like clapping and laughing and wooing and straight up just like responding to what's happening?
It's also probably for a lot of those people, a lot of those kids, the first experience they get seeing theater, if their parents aren't theater goers. I think that's important. I think young people should be introduced to the theater, and in communities where there aren't local productions of Shakespeare plays, there's filmed versions, of course, and kids love watching movies. And also, I mean, when I was in high school, we read the plays out loud.
Yeah.
You don't have to send homework and be like, go home and read Act 2 of Romeo and Juliet. You can be like, you're Romeo, she's Juliet. Don't make it weird.
Yeah. I remember we had to like read out loud, and at first it would just be like popcorn reading where like each student just took a turn reading, and then we would stop at words we didn't know. But then I remember our teacher made us like act out a scene, and we were doing R&J, and I had Mercutio, and I was just like, God damn it. I was up there for like 10 minutes. I was just like,
they make you stand
going
up.
off.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And improvised blocking?
No, we just were standing there, and I think like it was
Table
the
read.
end of, oh gosh, I've done R&J like so many times, but I can't remember. You got all your Mercutio drama, your Tybalt drama, and I think I was just up there, and I was just like,
Something you said, Grace, really stuck with me. You said you read in high school, but you didn't appreciate Shakespeare until later. And that really, like, I'm very much the same way, right? Like, I read R&J, like, you're this
Mm-hmm.
in high school, sophomore year. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I was still doing theater at that point, but I wasn't really excited about it. And then I went to undergrad and like it was a BA program. So I was in acting classes and started to like actually learn about what it meant. And I was excited. And I didn't see a professional production of Shakespeare until junior year. But I saw Much Ado and like fell in love, and I absolutely loved it. And like, that's where the real appreciation and like understanding of how amazing it actually is came. And I think that's what Helen Mirren's trying to say. But I also agree that like you can't completely eliminate that from education.
Chances are English teachers don't understand the way it works because it's not written like typical novels and like English literature. Like, I mean, we did R&J freshman year of high school. It took me until I was a senior in undergrad designing Romeo and Juliet to figure out why they fell in love, because everyone around them are idiots and they're smarter than everyone else. Like, you don't realize that until you're there and like reading and watching the play come to life, that like their whole meeting scene is just them verbally sparring at each other. And that's impossible to get with a bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds in a classroom with an English teacher whose experience with Romeo and Juliet is, who the fuck knows?
Yeah. The takeaway for me from the article too is like, you shouldn't read Shakespeare in high school or elementary school or whenever you read it and not unpack it. Because like my experience was the same reading it out loud, which I was like horrified to do. But then we didn't discuss any topic in the entire thing. And then we watched the Leonardo DiCaprio R&J on the streets. And the teacher was so proud of themselves, was like, I know what kids want. And the first time I read Romeo and Juliet, I was like, why is the teacher being so mean to Romeo and Juliet? This makes sense. Love is this strong and they are brave. And then you like go see it live and you're a little bit older and you're like, oh, how pathetic and sad. Youth is so fragile.
Yeah. Oh, we also watched, my English teacher, it was in the 9th grade too. She rotated between different just film versions of R&J. Like we would watch them after we read it. And she's like, okay, this year we're watching the Baz Luhrmann version. And, being like a 9th grader, I was like, I don't even know what that is. And then you just like have all these like 13, 14-year-olds foaming at the mouth, like for 2 class periods, just like, oh my God. I didn't know it could be like this.
I love that movie.
Yeah, and it's also like it just totally holds up. It's a great movie.
My high school was very, very nice, where whenever one of the local theater companies would do a Shakespeare, or our drama club would do a Shakespeare, all the students in that grade who was reading that play had to go see it.
Interesting enough, the only two productions like that I went to were Oliver Twist and Seussical the Musical. Of all of the productions, those are the two that happened in my high school.
I'm glad you got some culture.
Right?
Did you guys unpack Seussical?
No.
All the
Hidden themes. A
Shame.
lot of hidden themes.
Yeah, I was
can
gonna
we
say
plug-
just
can
like
we plug the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, because they're translating it into modern English, and I really want to read them.
I really thought you were talking about Seussical for a second.
Me too.
No. Sorry, a little bit of a left turn at the traffic light there.
like thank God I've never understood Seussical. There's a Seussical Junior, which is like kind of weird. but,
Redundant.
Yeah,
well,
just
I guess it's
shorter,
just a shorter version, which is good. Because I think everything should be a one act. I say having worked at it. Well, no, I say that after having worked at a Shakespeare company for 4 years, sat through a 3.5 hour long Hamlet twice. But yeah, I think just kind of going back to like the appreciation of having read certain things.
Oh my
In
God,
high
those
school-
books are good though. I'm sorry, we just got
I know, what did Logo say?
Logo said, at the risk of Hannah going on another rant, don't forget the Shakespeare version of Star Wars. Do I have that book with me?
Those stories are Shakespearean.
Yeah. Everything goes back. It's like cyclical, right? And
Yeah.
but anyway, I'm just admitting that I worked at this company, and a lot of those plays we did were the first time I read the play, because I was like, I don't know. Yeah, because I've ever felt so compelled to read As You Like It, like in my own time. So I think you just have to we just have to kind of eliminate this like facade that you have to be of a certain education level to have read Shakespeare, because I know it's a very controversial topic. A lot of people have strong opinions about Shakespeare, but at the end of the day, there's some good ones and there's some not as good ones and some not great ones, but it's here to stay. I don't think we're ever going to stop doing Shakespeare.
Well, on that note, I'd like to take us into our final article of the afternoon, which is Soured. Pittsburgh pickle balloon popped when it was being installed for the holiday season, by Joanne Klimovich Harrop in the Trib Live. So this is the sad story of a 35-foot vinyl pickle balloon.
Would you like to play the video, Evan?
Oh, no, I mean, I do hope you'll pull up the article again in a second, because I have a conspiracy theory about this that I want to get into in a minute.
Great. I'll do just the facts first, and the puns in the video I have quoted. So they were going to hang it up at EQT Plaza in Pittsburgh for the Christmas season, and it deflated upon installation instead. So they were intending to make this nod to the German Christmas tradition of the Christmas pickle ornament hidden in the Christmas tree for kids to find, and whoever finds it gets an additional present or something like that. For the president and CEO of the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership said, "A sliced pickle just won't cut it. And this is a really big deal, but while this pickle may have deflated, our spirits for a great holiday season have not." So that's the content of the article.
That hurts. It hurts so good.
I liked the first line of 2020 continues to deflate.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's very on brand for this year. So okay, so this is my conspiracy theory about this.
Yes.
I was disappointed that there were student comments about this, because I was like, someone else must have the same feeling as me, but it is not the case. So this pickle balloon, this is not its first outing. So it comes out every year for an event called Picklesburg, where it floats above. So the helium, it floats above one of Pittsburgh's bridges downtown. It says Heinz on the side. It was designed by the same company that makes the Macy's Thanksgiving Day balloons. And in its configuration for Picklesburgh, it's just a pickle. And so, yes, thank you. So as you can see, this is exactly it, right? So they added this thing to the top, which you can see a better picture of later down, to make it into a pickle ornament. There's a picture of just that. There it is. It's pointy. So they don't explicitly say why the thing tore, but it really feels like, and you can look at pictures of it being used for Picklesburgh, and it floats this way, sideways, not up and down like it's hung there. So it really feels like they have this professionally made pickle balloon. They used it improperly, and then they're just making bad puns about why it deflated.
So we have here, I don't know if you can see on the gallery view, but we have actual photograph of Evan reading this article. So you're saying that you think that the little ornament topper is what popped it.
Yes.
And you're saying that for past years, they have not had the ornament topper.
This is the first year they tried to hang it up as a Christmas decoration. They've only ever hung it up for this Picklesburgh event.
To hang it up hot dog style instead of hamburger style.
Yes.
I guess.
Well, it's like they were like, 2020 has been hard. Let's bring out the pickle to make people happy. Then they broke the pickle.
They broke the pickle. And our hearts.
What is more appropriate for this
and
past
our heart.
year?
So Evan, just to be real clear on the conspiracy here, you think it was rigged and the intention was to pop the pickle from the first place?
That's the conspiracy.
That's the conspiracy.
I am not willing to comment further at this time.
So what you're saying is you need to find out who built the topper.
Yes. And why they made it pointy.
Because that's how they look. I don't know. I'm not completely on board with this pickle, like your specific conspiracy, but I'm on board for a conspiracy.
Okay.
There's something with the hamburger hot dog theory that's resonating with
if you look at that picture, it's clear that like the side of the balloon is pointing into the anyway.
I love that like you said that instead of like horizontal and vertical, and immediately everyone gets it, even though it's like...
Although the irony though is that if it were quote unquote hamburger style, it would be like more hot dog style. So it's not the best analogy. But I guess we have to ask ourselves, of what orientation should a pickle be?
This
it's
way.
2020. I think pickles can be whatever.
Yeah, I think it should be this way.
Because this is how I would eat it. So this way.
Well, are you eating pickle
I
chips
would
or
never
pickle
eat a pickle
spears?
in the middle.
like corn.
Like a corn on the
Oh, don't get me started on how to eat corn on the cob. I will go off.
Well, if you're my mom, you break off one kernel at a time.
I'm
Oh
sorry,
my
what?
Oh my god.
That's how you
How do
get
you
the most
even-
corn. You
Well,
just work
everyone-
your way around one kernel.
No, does she spin it as she goes? I'm overwhelmed.
No, she literally like breaks it off.
Oh,
Like with a
I've
fork
never
or
been
something?
worried about corn efficiency.
I don't know. Maybe you should start being
Just get a
worried about
second
it.
corn on the cob.
Maybe.
Well, everyone, this has been a lovely episode of News from the Pickle World. We will see you all next week. Please don't forget to tune in. Thank you so much.
Today